Sweet. All right, let's talk a little more Washington and see if Catch's breakdown of the Washington receiver numbers makes sense to a guy that has watched every single route they've run and every single game they've played, and that is Roman Tomashoff. We've had him on before from Locked on Huskies, the podcast. Roman, we're 6 days away. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys? Good to be back.
We're doing well. As you can see, we're breaking down the Washington receivers, trying to figure out the matchups and where they're going to be. So, Catch, why don't you just pick up where you were breaking it down and throw something at Roman on these receivers.
Well, Roman, I was trying to – I wondered if there was anything that we could learn from, like, Pro Football Focus's statistical breakdowns of route depths and stuff like that. And so in looking at the numbers, it felt like the numbers told a story about how Washington likes to use these players. And it felt like with Odunze, he works with a left-handed quarterback. The numbers say he's outside the numbers to the left the same amount of times that he's working between the numbers. And so it feels like that's he'll work from left to the middle, but like if that left-handed quarterback is working it towards the sideline, that's kind of his area. And with McMillan, in only 5 games, you can see that he's like the screen guy and the get into space guy, and that they're getting him the ball behind the line of scrimmage, just above the line of scrimmage, but they want him after the catch in space, trying to do whatever. And then Polk is the one guy who seems to work the right a little bit, that if Penix is going to come back to his right side, Polk is often there, but he's really dangerous. And they've been really efficient in getting him the ball intermediate deep in the middle between the numbers. Do I have the kind of roles in the passing game correct? Have the numbers told an accurate story?
You definitely do. There's one other thing that McMillan adds to the offense that it doesn't necessarily show on the numbers or on the tape from this season, and that's mainly just due to the fact that he's been injured for most of the year. But Jalen McMillan is also just really, really good over the middle of the field, where there are a lot of times where he's kind of become the security blanket, where he'll just kind of sit and can still make something happen just over the middle, where, they definitely like to use his speed behind the line of scrimmage a lot. I really like, especially what you were saying about Odunze, where he's the first read on a good majority of these plays, because that's just the kind of guy that he's developed over the last 2 seasons. But that's a really accurate description, where McMillan and Polk, they're just both such sure-handed guys, where Polk struggled with some drops over the last 2 games of the regular season. But outside of that, it was really like just kind of an anomaly. But he's somebody where you just kind of throw it up to either him or to Rome Odunze, and they're coming down with that ball more often than not. That's something that we've seen them do all season long, where the contested catch numbers for this team have been kind of ridiculous this year, where Michael Penix just trusts these guys so much. I see one-on-one coverage. All right, I'm just going to throw it up, and I know my guys are going to come down with it.
Roman, in terms of McMillan coming back, we can all think about it in terms of like a baseball lineup, where if your number 3 hitter is out, your number 1 and 2 hitters probably have to adjust, and your cleanup guy is going to have to adjust a little bit. So now that McMillan is back, who does that take the most weight off of in terms of Polk and Odunze? Who gets to go back to being more of himself because McMillan's back?
It would definitely be Jalen Polk. Jalen Polk, sometimes he'll be the guy that operates in the slot, where they'll switch roles a little bit, because McMillan is a little bit faster than Polk is, so they're a little bit more confident putting him on the other side outside the numbers, while Polk can kind of just be the guy that will sit down or just run over the middle of the field. One game that I would definitely recommend watching, where you see that just kind of at what it was supposed to be all season long, was the Michigan State game, where Michigan State, you see Jalen Polk over the middle a lot, where Jalen McMillan is running up the other sideline and doing something over there, where Michael Penix just says, okay, I see Polk over here, and I'm just going to kind of dump it off to him. We saw one play that got batted up into the air, just falls right into his arms, and it turns into a 30-yard touchdown, because of course it did. That's how well things were going, like really early on this year. And then of course Jalen McMillan sprains his knee in that same quarter. So, things took a little bit of a turn there. But that's just kind of where I would say it comes from, where Jalen Polk is asked to do a whole lot of different things, where it's a much deeper question that I have in terms of like what his role would be at an NFL level. but I think that he's just such a solid, reliable guy where McMillan and Polk can be used interchangeably in a certain sense, but I think that the offense is at its best where McMillan is outside of the numbers and coming over the middle, and Jalen Polk can just kind of be there for whatever other role he needs to fill. Because when you see Dunze and McMillan getting all the attention on the outside, Jalen Polk just thrives in that single coverage.
Roman, I'm curious. We're sitting here talking about these weapons that Washington has, because I think as Texas fans and media guys look at this matchup, it's the obvious superpower of this Washington team that when they've got all three guys available to them, they become incredibly dangerous on offense. If we reverse engineer this, and I ask you from a Washington perspective, as you guys are looking in advance of this game, what's the part that you guys keep coming back to when you talk about if Washington's going to win this, we've got to be able to neutralize this, or Texas can't be allowed to do that? What is the thing that the Washington people are talking about right now with this matchup as it relates to Texas and what it might be able to do?
It's the same exact thing. It's coverage just on the other side of the football, where Washington's defensive backs were outside of Jabbar Muhammad, who's just been absolutely spectacular this year. There have been a lot of questions in the secondary this season where there have been some injuries, and there have just been a whole lot of other things where it's just been, I would say, like a touch below average in terms of what they're doing. So Elijah Jackson has had his moments, but he's also been beaten a couple times. The first Oregon game, he got beat by Troy Franklin more than a few times. And there are a whole lot of questions just on the back end of the defense where man coverage hasn't necessarily been the strong suit, but then opposing teams have found a lot of soft spots in zones. And I think guys like A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy can just do a really, really good job against the secondary. We saw, of course, in the Alamo Bowl last year. I know it's a very different team, but we saw him just kind of get freed up on numerous occasions. I know there were a couple of drops in that game too, where I wouldn't be surprised if those same things.
You don't say, Roman.
I had to get one of those in there.
You have
but
no idea how much Texas fans obsessed over those drops for 9 months.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure of it. But it is that same thing where Washington's back end, if they can't hold up, I have a feeling this would end up being a shootout of a game.
Roman, last time we had you on, we talked about a few different things with you. We did talk about an offensive line that has now won the Moore Award. They are the best offensive line in the country. People might have seen it, that big giant trophy with a couple of Washington helmets on it. Obviously, the Texas defensive front will use that as motivation. You talked to us about the center for Washington and the youth that's there. The Texas fans will see, what is it, 275, I think is how he's
285 listed. Is what he's up to now.
285, my bad. 285 for the listing. Let's go back to that player, because he's going to be really important. How confident are you that he's going to be able to hold up against Sweat, Murphy, and that Texas D?
So I remember the comments just saying, oh, he's so light. What's he going to be able to do? I really do think that he's going to hold up much better than some expect him to, because he's done it all season long, where he's been so impressive all year long. He's so smart, and he's already just developed into a leader in that room, even though he's the youngest guy that's starting up there, where everybody else really believes in him. We were having a conversation, my co-host on Locked On Huskies and I were having a conversation with a former UW center who watched him develop last season. On the sideline, he just said, man, that kid's a beast. He's better than I already ever was. And I love watching him, everything it is that he can do, because pound for pound, he's as strong as anybody out there. And while he's a little bit lighter, he hasn't shown it at all this season, where there have been some questions, especially at the guard spot this year. But Parker Brailsford, week in and week out, has just been as solid as they come in the middle of the offensive. I mean, he's a freshman All-American. He's been really good. He's not where if there were questions along the offensive line, it would not be at center.
Gotcha. Roman, I think when the Texas side looks at this game, I think there's concessions that Washington in the passing game, they're gonna throw the ball, they're gonna have some success, they're gonna score some touchdowns. They've got really good players in some cases, right? Tremendous players. But I think people who have watched this Texas team all year long feel like there's no way Washington is running the ball on Texas.
Sure.
That the nation's best running back in the last game had a hard time getting yards against Texas. Let's, for a moment, say that Texas does neutralize the Washington run game. Not like they rush for 20 yards as a team, but like it never becomes a real staple of the offense. They're never able to quite do it with some consistency.
Right.
What does that do? So if a Texas fan says, we're going to stop the run, that means what to you in this game?
I would say that it just kind of takes Washington back to where they were in the first month of the season, because the first month of the year, they actually really struggled to run the football. And against inferior opponents too, Boise State, Tulsa, Michigan State, Cal, where they didn't necessarily run the football overly well in those games. And they just said, all right, well, we have Michael Penix. We're going to have him drop back and throw it 50 times, where it's something we've seen them do before. And this coaching staff, Ryan Grubb especially, we know he's just a very confident individual, where he just says, all right, we've been in this position before. We know that we've got Michael Penix back there. And with this receiving core, they would still feel very confident in that, just in that situation where sometimes they like to just use these screen passes as an extension of the running game.
Couple more questions, kind of rapid fire. Is there a couple of individual matchups that you guys like the most in this game?
I think it's just instead of just going with one individual matchup, it's that exactly what we opened the show with. It's Washington's receiver core against Texas secondary, where just they've beaten every secondary they've seen this season, and there's no reason to not feel confident in that group going forward.
Roman,
and my last question. Oh, go ahead, Chad.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say my last question was simply from a Penix conversation. If you look at the numbers, he's the best player in the country in September. And I think I may have even asked you this question the first time that we had you on, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself a little bit.
No, it's fine.
But Chad and I had done these numbers. We looked at the PFF numbers. Penix against the blitz, first 4 games of the season, he had a perfect NFL passer rating. And I thought, okay, well, whatever you do, don't apparently blitz Michael Penix, because he will eat it up. And then in Pac-12 play, his numbers against the blitz in the final 8-9 games really tailed off. And you can look at just the raw passing numbers and go, okay, well, he wasn't hitting 200 as a passer rating in many games in the meat of the season. Right. My 2-part question is, and the answer is probably a combination of both, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How much of this was McMillan not being there and the offense is just different when 2 of the 3 guys are healthy versus all 3? And did teams find something? Like, what is it that teams were doing with the blitz late in the season that did cause Penix's numbers to come down from the stratosphere of best of the best to he was okay?
Yeah. So the biggest part of that was there was actually an injury on the offensive line, where there have been multiple injuries along the offensive line this season. But the biggest one, the one that really stood out to me when it came to just blitzing and pass protection, was right guard Julius Buelow, who got hurt against Michigan State. And he didn't come back until the Stanford game, or especially if you look at like the Arizona State game, where they really, really struggled against the blitz, where they did a fantastic job down there. They've got some great pass rushers down at Arizona State. They did a really good job of it. The first Oregon game, there's a lot of pressure up the middle, where Julius Buelow's guy stands 6'8", 330 pounds. He's just a mammoth in pass protection. He's got some, and he said it himself, he's got some questions when it comes to his run blocking, but having a guy like that in there against the blitz just is really, really helpful for everybody who's in there. And yeah, McMillan not being there is also a big part of that, right? Where we didn't see him for a significant portion of time. There were 2 games where he attempted to come back from his knee injury and then had to leave in the first quarter because he just kind of re-aggravated what was going on. So that almost felt like it threw the game plan off a little bit. And then there were a couple other things. I know these all sound like excuses, but these were just the facts of what was going on. Like Michael Penix was really, really sick with the flu for a couple of weeks. And you could tell that he just wasn't himself out there in terms of his athleticism, which I know isn't, anything to write home about, where it's just average, for lack of a better term. And I feel like when he was feeling really under the weather, you could see it. And then they go down, they play just in the pouring rain against top 10 Oregon State team, which has another really, really solid defense. It wasn't always there. There were a lot of drops in that game as well, if you go back and watch the film. But it's really a combination of things that have led to that, where it can't just be pointed at one thing and say, yeah, this is why Michael Penix's numbers weren't where they were.
Roman, in terms of a prediction, I don't think anybody's picking this one to be 13-10. I'm going up to 40 for the winner. I got like a 40-35 Texas win, but I could certainly pick Washington to win this game as well. I think this is a hell of a battle. Either team, I can argue, could win the thing. Give me how far up do you think it goes, and are you picking Washington to win it?
I definitely am. I usually refrain from score predictions because I'm just a huge jinx. That's just been my thing for the past couple of years now. But it's tough because I've been back and forth on this a little bit, where if we see the same Washington defense that came out and, especially in the first half, shut down a really, really good Oregon offense, I think that it could be a 31-24, 31-28 kind of game. But if we see the defense that we saw for, let's say the USC game, where they were a mess for the most part, especially in the first half, then I think it could be a 42-38 kind of game, just somewhere in that range where, Chad, as you said, the winner would definitely need to break 40 to get there.
Yeah. Roman, last question. The other semifinal.
Yeah.
Is there, between Michigan, Texas fans, I think, want Michigan because I think they feel like Michigan wouldn't have the offensive firepower over 4 quarters if Texas is playing really well. Same thing for Washington. If you guys had to pick one, either Michigan or Alabama in a championship game, is there a consensus thought on that game?
I don't know if there's a consensus thought. I've definitely been in that same camp as you guys, where I would probably rather see Michigan, where I haven't been super impressed with their offense and just everything that Alabama is able to do. It's just, I've been so impressed with Jalen Milroe over these last 6 weeks or so, where I love seeing everything it is that he's done. So I would probably also lean that direction, where I like Blake Corum. I think that they do a lot of good things at Michigan, but their offense just isn't the same as what Alabama's is. So I would definitely be in that same camp.
Roman, last one from me. I want you to give me a Washington hero on both sides. If this goes their way and they need a touchdown late, and it's not one of the big 3 receivers, give me a name for who it could be that we're not thinking of that catches that game-winning touchdown. And then on the other side, give me a name on defense that you think, if it's the big play to make at the end, whatever that play is, a pick, knock it away, sack, anything, the name of the Washington defender that you think could make the play.
That's a fantastic question, especially when I got to eliminate the receivers. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with tight end Jack Westover. Jack Westover, there have been multiple times this season on 4th downs where Michael Penix has just kind of been rushed into making a throw. One of them against Utah was just way above his head. He had to go up and make a fantastic catch. One against Oregon was way down on the ground, and he had to just sprawl out to make another catch, as I wear a David Ortiz shirt and just make a baseball reference. It really was like a dive and catch in center field. It was fantastic. And then on defense, I'm going to give you 2. So if it's a sack or any kind of tackle that needs to be made, give me Braylon Trice, because he's just been that guy all season long, done a fantastic job pressuring, leads the nation in pressures this season. He's done a really good job of just getting after it all year long. And then anything on the back end, I got to give it to Jabbar Muhammad. Just the way he played against, especially Oregon State. If we see him do anything like he did in that game, because I have a feeling that he'll see Xavier Worthy for the majority of the evening. I keep forgetting the game starts at like 9 when we get out there. Yeah. But I would have to go with Jabbar Muhammad, because he's been the guy time and time again who has just been asked to make those plays in big moments, and he's delivered every time.
Roman, I just wish we played you guys more often, because you're a great guest.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I love coming on here. If you guys ever need anything else, please feel free to reach out to me.
We need more Washington. Look, if you guys end up playing the national championship game, we'll probably call you back to talk a little whatever. But
hey, I'll be down there.
I've really enjoyed having you on as a guest. You've been a great addition for us the last couple of times we've had you. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys reaching out to me. This has been a ton of fun.
Thanks, Roman. Enjoy the game. Texas fans would just tell you not to enjoy it too much, but we'll see. It should be a hell of a battle.
It absolutely will be. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man.
You got it. Hey, Roman, you can still hear me, right? Don't mess with cops in New Orleans. That's my tip for you.
Yes, there you go. That's good advice. That's good advice.